Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Muntz, and this is episode 26, The Art of Teaching the Vowel, with Amanda Quist. I am really excited to bring this episode to you today. In fact, this has been quite a while in the making, getting this episode put together for a lot of reasons. I am just so pumped to get to talk to Amanda Quist about this topic. It's one of my favorite topics to think about and discuss in our profession. It leaves philosophy just a little bit and goes into the realm of hard science, you could say, as we discuss the acoustics, the objective definitions of a vowel, what allows the human to hear a vowel and perceive a vowel, and more importantly, how we as choral directors should be teaching the concept of vowels. What are the best tools for that? Which, of course, leads to the obvious shout out to our most recent sponsor on this episode, Voce Vista, which we will discuss, actually, the uses in the classroom of Voce Vista and some of the applications that software can allow in our classrooms. In fact, one of the interesting things about this episode to me is that the connection that I have with Voce Vista for this show is because of Dr. Quist and a presentation we will discuss during this episode, which is kind of cool in that my first exposure to the software was from her. So we're going to tackle all these topics of what is a Band-Aid vowel, why do choir directors use them, what are our concepts of blend and where blend comes from, and are they necessarily the best concepts? Is it possible that sometimes we teach blend and we teach vowels the way that our teacher told us, but we haven't really investigated the science behind whether or not there's a better way? So our task today is to investigate. We're going to dig in with a person that I consider to be the expert in our field on this topic, and that's Dr. Amanda Quist. And before we do, I'm going to set up for you just a little bit of a walkthrough through Voce Vista and the way that you can play with this on your own at home, so that when you get a chance to listen to the full episode and learn all the nuts and bolts and all the super nerdy sciencey things we're going to talk about in this episode, you will have some kind of a visual for how the product works. And by the way, did you know that at vocevista.com/choralosophy, you can download a trial copy of this software for free and play with it for 30 days before you even decide if you want to buy it. It's a $99 software, the basic version. There's a pro version if you get super nerdy that's more than that. But for $99 you get this software, and that's obviously a higher end piece of software than like a $4.99 app on your phone, right? So you got a chance to play with it a little bit, and you can look at my little screen capture that I'm about to show you and walk you through if you're on the YouTube channel, and if not, I will verbally walk you through what's going on. And then of course you can head over to vocevista.com/choralosophy and download the trial copy for 30 days. And then once you've played with it, you're going to want the copy, and then you'll use Choralosophy at checkout and you get 10% off of that $99. So check this out. This is so cool, you guys. Okay, when you open up the Voce Vista software, it comes to this blank screen, and you can kind of see a pitch range all the way from 70 megahertz all the way up to 3,000, 4,000. You can scroll up, scroll down to see basically the entire range of frequencies that your microphone and the software are able to record. There's all kinds of fun toys in here, but I'm going to show you just the very basic thing, especially when you're using this in your choir classroom. So I'm going to click record here. It's the big red button, universal red circle for record. Then you're going to see the screen come alive. And there, as I speak, you'll see the overtone patterns that are created by my voice. And if I were to sing a note, ah, you can see the pattern become regular, which of course is why we hear it as a pitch and not just a noise. So that's something you can point out to students, and I do that usually the first month of school. We distinguish between noise and pitch, and we show that that is because it's a repeated mathematical predictable pattern, then we hear it as a pitch. So in a choir rehearsal, here's something I might do. I might have the basses sing a note like this. Ah, and I'd have them stagger breathing. I'd have them sing continuously. I'm going to pause that there now, and I can highlight this pattern that I made here. So what I would do then is I would have, looks like that's about a B that I sang, and what I would do then next is I'd have the tenors sing an octave above that. And what that would do is if they sang it in tune, their red line, their fundamental, would show up right where the bass's first overtone is. And they would know right away if it was right or wrong based on whether or not the picture changes, if they add extra lines that don't belong, that kind of thing. And so it's like Dr. Quist is going to talk to us about in this episode. It's really interesting because a lot of things that might not make sense to some kids, when they can visualize it, it's really amazing to see what happens. I've had voice students that have used this in private lessons where they were able to fix things by simply watching their voice fly by on the screen that I've never been able to help them fix before. All of a sudden it just clicks. You're just creating this visual representation of what the sound looks like is remarkably helpful for students. So I encourage you to check this out. And what you're seeing me do right now in the screen capture is something you can do for free if you head over to vocevista.com/choralosophy and download the trial version, and you'll get a chance to play with this and see if it's something that you'd want to use in your classroom. So now, without any further ado, here is my conversation in full with Dr. Amanda Quist. Okay, I'm here with Amanda Quist. Amanda is the new director of choral activities at Miami Frost School, and I'm a big fan of hers. And so I asked her to come on to the show and talk about some ideas of teaching vowels and some of the science behind vowels, because I saw her in a session where she talked about the way she approaches the science of vowels, and I was just in nerd heaven. So I'm excited to get a chance to talk to her about this topic. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm equally a big fan of yours and excited to be asked to be here, and looking forward to it.
Well, great. I'm excited. So why don't we'll start off with and just tell us a little bit about you and how you got from little girl Amanda days to being a big time VCA at a big school.
Sure. Well, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and grew up there. My father is an organist, and so spent lots of time at church listening to my dad play. And of course, he was a big fan of Bach, and so got a lot of that as a kid. And I took piano lessons from my dad, which I don't recommend because I didn't practice, and I think that relationship just doesn't really work as a piano teacher-student. But certainly he encouraged my love of music, as did my mom, who was kind of more of an amateur person in a band, so forth. So sang in school all the way through high school. My high school choir director encouraged me to go into music, and I thought that he was probably wrong, that I didn't think that was the right path for me. So I decided to go into psychology instead. And I went to Grand Rapids Community College because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and my family did not have a lot of money. So we went there for a starting point, and I ended up in a group called Shades of Blue, which was conducted by Dwayne Davis, a vocal jazz group, and it was pretty life-changing for me. So it took me about a semester to realize that I wanted to go into music professionally. And he actually walked away one day and gave me a baton and said, "Here, I want you to conduct while I go step out for a minute." And it was an amazing feeling. It just felt like it was like a sense of home and just a sense of, I don't know, the purpose of the whole. It was amazing. So that's kind of how it all began. And I followed through and went to Western Michigan University, got my bachelor's degree in music education, and I taught high school in Grand Rapids for 4 years, taught middle school as well, and I directed one of the choirs for the North American North American Choral Company, which was the same corporation that Sean Ivory and Paul Caldwell were a part of. So I got to know them and their music, of course. Went back to grad school, got my master's degree in choral conducting, and then went on to get my doctorate in choral conducting at the University of North Texas, and started my career teaching as a director of choral activities at San Jose State University, then spent 9 years at Westminster Choir College, and now I am in my 4th month at the University of Miami Frost School as a DCS.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Quite a journey, it sounds like.
Yes.
We were talking before we went on, and also a new mom all at the same time.
Yeah, we had a baby in March, and we were not planning on going anywhere, but this opportunity popped up, and we just decided to go through 2 huge life changes at the same time. So
wow. So it was baby, then new job.
Yeah, so baby in March. I
Oh,
think I
wow.
got the job offer 1 week after the baby was born,
Oh, wow. See,
literally.
yeah, I saw your announcements for those things on Facebook, and I just kind of assumed that, like, when baby came, you kind of already knew you were heading out to a new place, and but that was, man,
No,
must have been a whirlwind.
yes, a
Oh,
crazy whirlwind. If you can imagine being 1 week into having a new baby and then having somebody call you and saying, "Hey, you want to move your life down to Miami?" It was quite a thing to go through, but yeah, we're here and things are going well.
that this is not the topic of this episode, but the I find it interesting. Like the psych, if you look at psychology, the literature, and look at the things that trigger anxiety, uh, uh, a new child, a new job, a new home, a new town are all like up on the top of the list. And so we're praying for you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I will vouch that that is absolutely accurate. That is very anxiety producing.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I'm lucky to have a very supportive husband who agreed to stay home with our son this year. So that
mm,
has made it possible for me to kind of focus on starting this new chapter and feeling like our son is in great hands. So that's a really fortunate thing that is not always the case for everybody. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's very cool.
yeah,
So, as I
yeah,
mentioned, I came across you for the first time when you were in Missouri doing our all state choir, and you did
yeah,
a session where you put Voce Vista up on the screen and you
yeah,
started showing us all kinds of cool stuff about the overtone series and how the human voice is unique in terms of the overtone series. And just partly, I was fascinated by the software itself, and as soon as I got back, I went and bought it. Like I went home immediately,
good.
bought it, and I started using it in my classroom. Um, one of the things that was most intriguing to me was the idea from your presentation that um, you could objectively define what a vowel is, because I think
Yeah,
growing up in the choir world, it's always been presented to me as something that is based on the conductor's opinion. Um,
mm,
and I never liked that definition because it didn't make sense to me. I understand the idea that music is both an art and a science, and I always kind of loved that the fact that those two worlds mingle. And so that presentation, I mean, I'm sure you go to give presentations at places and you hope people are enjoying and learning from what you present, but I don't know if you realize that somebody like me might be sitting out there and just like getting so excited that I can't even possibly fathom. And that's essentially what that session was for me.
that's so
So,
great.
yeah, like, because partly, again, it's just kind of that perfect storm of where my nerd level lies and what I'd been kind of feeling like at this stage in my career, the things I had been saying to choirs,
Yeah,
I felt like I needed to prove it,
yeah.
and your presentation helped me do that. And so my first question is, how did you get into that topic? Like, where was your first entry into that type of a technology, and b interest level?
Yeah, I might take it back just a little bit. So
Yeah.
when I came out of high school, I was a person who in high school sang in solo ensemble festival, was a soloist, all these things. So when I got to college and I started taking voice lessons, that was the first time anybody ever really spoke to me about technique beyond breathing and sing a tall vowel. That's all anybody had ever really said to me.
Right.
So I remember my voice teacher, who was a tenor, and he had a beautiful voice, would have me sing everything on ah. And then he would point to his forehead and say, put it right here and sing ah. And I could never make the sound he was making. And I tried and tried and tried. And he tried different things with me, but nothing ever made sense. So I switched voice teachers to a woman who I think heard my voice and realized that I had all of this space, but none of the point in my voice. And so she said, we're going to do an exercise on a sound called Ming. And I thought it was so strange. And she said, and it shouldn't feel like you're singing, it should feel like a noise almost. And I said, well, all right. So she would do it, and it would be so loud and so clear. And I didn't understand how she was doing it, but she started getting me to make this sound. And then over time, it started to click and pop in. And I realized, oh, it's much easier if I sort of figure out where the sweet spots in my voice are, essentially. And the reason
Mm-hmm.
that the other situation wasn't working was because I was learning from somebody who was giving me a vowel that I couldn't be successful with based on where it was in my range and how young I was as a singer. My larynx just was not ready to resonate any vowel on any pitch. I needed more help than that. So that's kind of where it started. And then I think over time, just studying voice privately and then teaching voice, I learned more and more about that kind of balance of point and space, the chiaroscuro that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just became fascinated with it because I was just always obsessed with trying to figure out my own voice and how come I couldn't do this or I could do that, whatever. Finally, when I got to the University of North Texas, they have a vocal pedagogy program. And as a choral conductor, I was able to take voice ped as my cognate area.
Uh-huh.
And I jumped on it. I was so excited. I said, yes, teach me everything you know. And that was the first time that somebody put Voce Vista up and said, this is a spectrum. Here's a spectrogram. Here's what vowels look like. Here's why this is this. And here's what the singer's foreman is. And all of a sudden, it was like all of the things I had struggled with and thought through in my own voice, I could see it on the screen and it made so much sense to me. And I thought about all the implications for choirs and how helpful it can be to have that information. So that's kind of how that all progressed. And I'm still learning every day about it. I mean, I certainly am not an expert, but I just really fascinated by it.
So would you say then over the years of you kind of being involved in or being interested in not only obviously the choral conducting side of your life, but this vocal pedagogy idea, that the way you expect your choirs to sing or that you would like them to sing is informed by this information? And if so, like, talk us through that. How do the worlds collide for you?
Absolutely. So I'll just give a basic example. When I'm dealing with a choir and we're doing most repertoire, which falls in the staff, I'll tend to, if I'm training them on a neutral vowel, I'll tend to use E or U.
Mm-hmm.
In IPA, little I or lowercase u.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to watch out for my Michigan accent, which can get in there. So I just have to clarify the vowel. Right. And the reason I do that is it was intuitive to me to do that. But then when I started looking at the science behind it, I realized that the way that it kind of works, at least in my understanding, is there are formants. This is a term that we toss around a lot, but the formants they don't sound. There's no sound to a formant, but it's just, it's sort of an area of acoustic potential. So if I sing a certain pitch on a certain vowel, if that pitch and that vowel line up, in other words, the formant of that vowel and the pitch are similar, then the sound is much louder without me having to do any work. Mm-hmm. And we experience this all the time, like a piano, a soundboard, or, I sometimes in my presentation will sing into a pipe and you can hear how it suddenly gets louder. We hear this in nature, or you'll walk into a room and you'll hear a pitch buzzing and the room feels like it's almost vibrating. That's because there's a potential for a pitch to come into that space and make that space resonate, make the air in that space resonate, essentially. And then it makes the air column essentially resonates, and then the sound comes out much more efficiently and much louder. So for choral singing, E and U have first formants that tend, I should say, to be near the fundamental pitches that we're singing in the staff. So therefore, singing on one of those two vowel choices tends to be easier for the choral setting. And so I will almost never have a choir do a neutral vowel of ah, mm-hmm. because even though for the men, and especially if they're trained, it may not be problematic, for the women, it tends to be more problematic because the first formant for ah is much higher than the pitches that we're singing. And that means that instead of the fundamental frequency, we have to get one of the overtones of the pitch that we're singing to connect with the formant. And it's just science that your fundamental pitch tends to be loudest, and then it gets softer and softer as you go. So you have to be boosting quite a bit of acoustic energy out of your larynx in order to tap into that. So you can sing that vowel But unless you are, unless there's a certain level of training, and even then it can be very challenging to make that vowel feel easy. So that's just an example of how that comes into my rehearsal setting.
Well, yeah, and even if from just the sheer math of having multiple singers in the room, the
Yeah,
margin for error of every singer not figuring out that exact feeling and that
yeah,
exact sense of then yes, and so I think for the way I would explain it is that the e and the u simply reduce the number of possible mistakes
yeah,
that
that's probably right.
uh, acoustically that could happen in the rehearsal. So there's less, even though you know in a lot of cases you're not going to sit down with your choir right before you sing something and have this nerdy of a conversation maybe, but in the reality they're listening for those things anyway. They just don't know what to call them.
Yes.
And so the e and the u is yeah, I agree. It's a similar um, it's a similar thing. So what I think is interesting too is that and this is a terminology question that I'm going to go back to one of the first things you said, and you were explaining the formant as
Yeah.
being some kind of a acoustical potential.
Yeah.
How would you explain to someone then that gets confused between the idea of formant used that way and then the singer's formant, which is
Yeah. So there are to make a vowel, and this is part of that presentation that I do with Voce Vista. You can isolate the overtones of a sound, and it's the collection of those overtones and how loud and soft each one is that create timbre. So you hear that it's a human, and you hear that the human is singing a certain vowel.
Mhm.
In order for us to perceive the vowel, we have to have two formants, and two formants define the vowel. So the first formant, which starts on an E vowel probably around 300 hertz, and without my math in front of me, but I don't know, maybe middle C or something like that. And it sweeps up to about 800 hertz on an A vowel, and then it sweeps back down to about 300 on an U vowel. So it just kind of creates a bell shape. The second formant starts on an E vowel way up at about 3,000 hertz almost. And then it starts to just sweep down as you go. So if we start at 3,000 on E, A, O, U, it's just heading down the closer you get to U. But the existence of those two formants at the same time are necessary for us to perceive the vowel. So what's basically happening is I'm speaking or singing a pitch, and the vowel that I am using has formants in it. And so certain overtones are being boosted, and we hear those overtones and the collection of that relationship as a vowel sound. Now, the singer's formant goes beyond formants 1 and 2. The singer's formant is formants 3, 4, and 5 clustered together. It's sort of a phenomenon. I think there are people out there who understand how that works, but it's a lot of people just sort of leave it unexplained. But it's sort of a clustering, and what it does is it gives an acoustic boost to the sound at about 3,000 hertz. And there's all kinds of stuff that goes on in the throat, where there's like a ratio between different parts of the anatomy in our larynx and in our throat and in our cavity and all of that. There's different things happening in order for the singer's formant to be occurring. But because it occurs at about 3,000 hertz, that pitch, 3,000, is far beyond anything we hear on a piano. It sounds like a buzz or a bell. That is higher than any of the overtones that the instruments can play. Mm-hmm. So, and there's something about the shape of our ear that we are well attuned to that frequency. Just like a dog can hear certain pitches, but humans can't. Humans hear 3,000 hertz, and something about the shape of our eardrum boosts that frequency as it comes, or the ear canal boosts it as it comes to the eardrum. So what we do is we perceive a singer's pitch at 3,000, and we can hear the fundamental pitch over the top of the orchestra, even though the fundamental itself is not nearly as loud as, the horns or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we're talking 5 formants by that point, right? So the first formant and the second are the vowel. 3, 4, and 5 are a cluster and create that kind of ring or buzz in the sound.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. I'll add to that a little bit, and I will see if you buy this.
Yeah.
So the idea of the singer's formant as being that cluster of you're saying formants, and I would also say that it's a cluster of the overtones themselves, in the sense that it's, in fact, when I play around with Voce Vista, when I'm in my classroom by myself and it's totally quiet, and if I'm feeling like if my voice is really working that day, and I'm when I sing, I'm kind of a boomer. I have a pretty big voice, and so I can get to the point where if I feel like it's really working, my first overtone, say on an ah vowel, is actually louder than my fundamental. And so,
Yes.
yeah, and so, but if I'm feeling like a little bit of phlegm on my folds or whatever, it just doesn't work. Like I can't get that to happen. And so, in a lot of ways, I think what's going on is that the overtones themselves, of course, are creating overtones, and
Ah,
because it's like thinking like waves in a bucket of water. The wave bounces on another wave and creates a new
yeah, yeah.
wave, and by the time, and if you're singing with enough resonance, those waves eventually, mathematically, they just get closer and closer and closer together, and by the time they bunch, they're bouncing off of each other so quickly that they gather energy rather than dispersing energy. And
Yeah,
so,
and there is certainly a clustering up there of,
mhm.
so that's an interesting thought. Overtones, certainly, like if we sing a singular pitch, um, the fundamental produces an overtone, and that's all in very mathematical equal multiples. And of course, the pitches themselves don't. It's not octave, octave, octave. Of course, it's octave, fifth, octave, third, fifth, etc.
Mhm.
But once you get up there, it's also probably true that those overtone pitches are just so close together that they cluster,
Mhm.
and so the whole thing is sort of its own kind of ringing line of a cluster of sound. But what's amazing to me, you're talking about singing an ah vowel, and your first overtone is louder than your fundamental. That also could be because, depending on what pitch you're singing, if it's an ah, the first formant for ah is 800 hertz, and that may mean that your first overtone is locking in with the first formant of ah, and that's why it's louder than the fundamental pitch. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, that does make sense, and of course, because it doesn't happen, uh, it doesn't happen when I try to sing every pitch, and it doesn't happen when I try to sing every vowel. So
Right.
that totally makes sense that it would be a situational thing based on the formats. And slight diversion. I think I would like to congratulate you already. Early in the episode, we are officially, this is the nerdiest episode I've ever done.
That's hard for me to avoid. I'm so sorry.
No, 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 no. I love it. But for the varying levels of nerddom in my audience, I actually want to switch now to all taking all this information, which you can actually, um, I think is not all that hard to understand if you do a little bit of reading about it and a little bit
Yes.
playing with it. However,
Yep.
let's take it now into the classroom.
Yep.
So you, let's say a person who's listening to this, they're like, oh, okay, so I'm interested in this whole world. I want to know more about it, and that's fine. But if I want to do something with my choir related to this tomorrow, like
Yep.
what would be some ideas that you'd have for it? Just going to jump in briefly and shout out some of the sponsors of this show. Of course, sightreadingfactory.com is a go-to every single day for me for literacy tools in the classroom. Just found out just this last week about some more tools that I didn't even know they had in the challenge mode, where students, whether they have an assignment or not, can turn the recording on while they're sight reading at home, and it will then play their own voice back to them with the correct notes being played. A lot of you guys probably knew that. I didn't. I was freaking out. That's such a cool thing because I was always concerned about how do they grade this when I'm not there. Well, it can show them by playing the correct answer alongside their answer if they were on or not, which is awesome. So head over to sightreadingfactory.com and get a membership for you and for each of your students, and enter Choralosophy at checkout to get 10% off there. You can also get sheet music from awesome composers at a couple of our sponsors. Graphitepublishing.com has a stable of awesome composers working there. Eric Barnum, Tim Takash, Jocelyn Hagan, many, many more. Joshua Shank. You can head over there and use their awesome search engine to find music by voicing, by difficulty, by accompaniment instruments, all kinds of great things there. And you can also use the promo code Choralosophy for 10% at that website. And last but not least, we have RyanMain.com, who is also a sheet music publisher online. He's a self-published composer who has tons of songs that kids just love to sing, that he has created with those young students in mind, to not only for their ranges, but for their reading levels and for their maturity levels, subject matter. He's really, really good with kids and is really plugged in with what kids need and what they want in the choral classroom. So head over to ryanmain.com and grab one of his site licenses with the discount from this show using Choralosophy at checkout. Now, last thing that I'll mention in this little commercial is that with this Voce Vista software, as I'm rolling out my push to get this in every single classroom, because I really think it's that important that every classroom has this as a tool in order to educate kids on the science of what it is that we are doing when we sing. I'm going to create over at Patreon, on patreon.com/choralosophy, a more in-depth online tutorial using a screen capture and walking you through a lot of the features that I use with Voce Vista, and just in case you're interested in learning how to do it. So if you want some perks like that or some extra content like that, you can head over to patreon.com/choralosophy. And for as little as $3 a month, you can subscribe over there. This show will continue to be free, but over on Patreon, I'm making a subscription service where people can take these show topics and just dive in deeper, as well as some patron-only episodes that we do there every month. So I encourage you to do that and check out the Patreon growing community over there. Now back to the interview.
A couple of warm-ups that I would suggest. So I often, I use this concept also to deal with intonation. So I'll just say that as a starting point. When I want to get a choir to produce a sound that they can feel where everybody's kind of riding the same wave of resonance, let's just say. Essentially what's happening, and I'll say it one nerdy thing and then I'll make it practical, but the nerdy
Okay.
part of this is if everybody is making their best sound, their most resonant, clear, easy sound, that will blend, I think. Now that's not to say that vibrato doesn't play into that and intonation, etc. But if everybody's got their best sound, that's a starting point. And so one of the ways that I train that is I train singers to hear each other and to find that easiness with one another. So what I'll do is I'll take a pitch G or F sharp, just kind of depending on the day and the group. And I'll say, all right, let's hum. And I'll ask them to hum without a lot of pressure, and to start softly, and then to add what I might use a word buzz, or add, we might play with like sounds of bumblebees or things like that, and just kind of humming. And then we come to the pitch and we hum, and I say, all right, add some buzz. I add a physical gesture, like I might say, grab a rope and pull against me, like it's tug of war, so that they feel sort of a sense of electricity in the hum. And then I go into a vowel. And if I start with the hum and go into E, for example, then that feels really good and clear. And because we've started with a hum and kind of a speech-like onset, the E tends to resonate beautifully and unify without me even having to say anything. Then I go back to the hum, and I keep informing them about, or reminding them about, posture and breath. Keep breathing when you need to. Do not get locked up in this exercise. We'll hum, and then we'll sing A. We'll hum, and we'll sing Ah. Now, once we get to Ah and O, all of a sudden you can hear an overtone start buzzing in the room. So the men usually are an octave beneath the women. But if the pitch is G, then we're going to hear the D above the women start to buzz. And it's really the men's overtone that we're hearing. And it tends to occur on the vowels A or O. And almost always the singers can hear it. And so then I'll go back and say, okay, because we are singing a resonant, clear, unified sound, we're kind of using science to boost our volume and the easiness of our sound together, because we're locked in, and you can hear the hum inform the sound. I'll start there. You go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, can I add that, yes, you are hearing that when we hear the D, we're hearing the overtone of the men, but we're hearing it better and more amplified because the women are amplifying the first overtone of the men. So
Exactly.
they're adding energy to that one, which allows the second one to become audible, or to the next one to become audible.
Exactly. And that's how I like to train choirs to tune, is
Hmm.
to literally sing into the overtone that's there, because and you can feel it ring. And that's why I use lots of fifths and octaves when I do warm-ups. So that's one warm-up that I'll do. And then from that, let's say we're using the pitch G as our starting point. I'll ask the basses to go down a fifth to C, the sopranos to go up a fourth to C, and the altos to go to E. But we always start with that ring. We find the ring between the tenor and bass and the soprano. Once that's locked in, then I'll add the alto, and then we'll play around with it. So that's one way I might use it. Another way I would use it is, I'll do I'll do different exercises with playing with the amount of resonance that we're using. So I'll say to an honor choir, all right, let's play volume knob. And I'll say, don't try to get louder, just play with brightness, like an equalizer in a stereo. How bright and dark can we make the sound? And we'll turn our hands and kind of, we'll go in and out and play around. But we'll just talk about what that feels like. And it's just, I'm getting them to listen in a different way. Another exercise that I love to do with this is I'll start on a G, let's say, and I'll say, all right, G is so. You can either stay on so, or you can slide to do, or slide down to do, or whatever, but you can only land on a do or a so in any octave you want. And I teach it like it's THX is what I call it, like the beginning of a movie, Dolby Digital Sound, and it kind of goes, woo, and then it locks in, and it kind of, blows you back. It's that sound where we slide and then we lock in, and you can feel when the octaves and fifths lock in. And I'll use a vowel like O, or I tend to use O or ah for that, actually, because again, the men tend to boost in the right way for us to kind of feel it and hear it. And that exercise can train resonance and intonation of octaves and fifths. But if I'm going to use this in a choral setting where I'm trying to teach just great sound and vowel structure, I'll use E and U, like I said, with a neutral vowel, because of the way that the overtone series and the formants work. And it's just going to encourage, I think, like you said, the best success, the least amount of trouble in the sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're doing those types of warm-ups and exercises in class, how much do you actually, now I know you are teaching at the collegiate level,
Yeah.
But how much in the actual process of the warm-up do you talk about overtones, or are you just mostly talking about what it feels like and what they're hearing?
I'd say I try to balance it. Some days I don't say anything, and I just let them feel it, because I don't want them to, shut down and get bored.
Mm-hmm.
But so I just let them feel it. But then sometimes I'll talk to them and I'll say, let's think about why octaves and fifths are easier to tune. And then I'll ask them questions like, okay, this chord's not in tune. How should we approach it? And they'll say, well, we got to start with the octaves and the fifths. Who's got it? Oh, the tenors and the bass, or whatever. And I've done that with high school choirs. I've done it with honor choirs, and certainly with college. So I would say to some degree I do. Sometimes I bring in presentations, and I'll just take a half an hour during rehearsal and go through it, because for some people it makes a lot of sense and they can start to self-select a little better. And for some people, they just need to feel it, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I love, you alluded to this earlier, and one of the things that I love about your approach to all of this, in addition to the fact that it matches my own nerdy preferences, but is the thing you said before about how singing with blend is actually each singer singing with their best resonance.
Yeah.
And because I think it is fair to say that in our profession, that is a minority opinion, and maybe not a consciously minority opinion, but it's the typical practice, at least in American choirs, is to remove resonance from the sound to achieve blend. Especially with younger singers, because this kind of goes back to the math problem that I mentioned earlier, where if you remove audible overtones from each individual singer's sound, then you've got less overtones that then could disagree with each other and sound out of tune. And so so again, most directors, I don't think, learn all this stuff in college, so they're not thinking, oh, better remove the first and the third overtone here from this vowel. They don't. They don't think that. They just think, okay, well, if we go to more of a kind of sound
Mm-hmm.
that is completely free of audible overtones, then I can get every singer to match that faster. And
Yeah.
the concert's next week. So
Right.
this is what we do. So in addition to that, first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, what are some factors that maybe contribute to that I might be missing?
That's a great question, and it's a complicated one. So thinking about when I select E or oo in my vowel stream, oo is a choice that I would say works well if you are trying to deal with intonation, because oo does remove. So the second formant of oo is low, and so therefore there's not a lot of boost of overtones beyond the fundamental frequency on a new vowel, and that's why it's a good vowel to tune with. And just as you said, it removes a lot of the information going up above the fundamental pitch.
Hmm.
I think in certain settings that can be helpful, because what you're also doing is training the collective listening of the singers. So if they can hear what it sounds like when it's in tune, and then you add a different vowel or more volume or more overtones, hopefully they can still tap into what that felt like, even though the sound has more dimension to it.
Hmm.
I think one of the trickiest parts of this conversation, and maybe it's something I shouldn't even say, has to do with vibrato. One of the things I used to study is, do we resonate with and without vibrato? Does the singer's formant exist with and without vibrato? And it does.
Hmm.
A tenor can create the singer's formant just as ferociously as they can with or without vibrato.
Yep.
So I think
Exhibit.
sometimes people,
I was going to say Exhibit A, the 16.
right, or the
Yep.
talus
Yep.
scholars,
Yep.
or the tenebrae,
Hmm.
or and I think that sometimes people go to oo and they reduce resonance, but really what they're hearing is a discrepancy of pitch, because the vibrato it's inconsistent in each voice. And usually when vibrato is a problem, it's because somebody's technique isn't totally lined up. And of course, for most of our students, that's the case.
Hmm.
But yeah, listen to Tenebrae or the Swedish Radio Choir or Telescholars or the 16, any of those groups. They sing with very little vibrato, and yet it's melt your face off resonant and beautiful and colorful. So there's really no reason. You don't have to reduce the overtones of a voice, I don't think, to blend. I think there's some other things at play there.
Well, I think, yeah, but I think the only thing I'll quibble with is if you say there's no reason. I think there is a reason. I don't think it's a good reason, but I think the reason is it's easier. So
Yeah,
if you're working with younger singers, that's why some people call this or use the term choral Band-Aid vowels.
yeah,
Like if I can wrap every single vowel my choir sings in oo,
yeah,
uh, then I'm again eliminating the chances that they will sing out of tune. Um,
yeah,
and so, and in fact, and that's what a Band-Aid does. It doesn't cure the thing. It just
right,
it just covers it up. And so we do it. We do it because of expedience, and
yeah,
oftentimes because, unfortunately, a lack of education in the science behind it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I think that's an important distinction. And what I wonder, you know, my personal feeling about it is, of course, that when I work with kids and adult singers, is that we're going to go for the. I think you would agree with this, but just based on what you've said, with this overtone rich sound, and we're going to do the extra work that it takes to get it to all line up and be able to
yeah,
listen for it. But at the same time, I think that the Band-Aid vowel thing, I'd also like to get your take on that too, because uh, through the use of the software, the Voce Vista software, it can actually show us like what vowel you're singing. And
right.
and for a lot of directors I've seen, I can't even tell you how many conversations I've just had to sit on my hands on a Facebook group as people debated what a pure E vowel actually was anatomically.
Yeah,
And of course, the most common one that you'll see is that, wrap your lips around it like ooh and sing E.
right,
And of course, that's an umlaut.
right.
And it's not a pure E, and it's not an opinion. It's like you don't even have to be a singer. You just go to like a linguistic textbook too, and
Yeah,
you know. But again, it becomes like, are we doing this because we were taught by our choir teacher how to do it that way? Or
Yeah.
are we doing it based on any kind of science? I know, I don't, if you've ever listened to my show, we don't shy away from controversy, but um,
Yeah.
is this something you see too? Because it's kind of one of my biggest pet peeves in the whole world.
Of saying it's an eval when it's really not, you mean? Or something
That
similar in that
not
vein?
Yeah, just that kind of fallacy. The idea
Gonna be
that
yeah.
yeah.
I think it's actually, I think it's a kind of a complex subject. So my
Mhm.
suggestion, for example, of training on E and U is because those tend to be more successful, and maybe in some ways they are band-aidy. Um, I think also the age of the singer is a factor, and it's difficult to talk about any of this without talking about the larynx itself. And so, if you're dealing with children or children whose voices haven't quite developed yet, um, there are so many variables going on in someone's larynx that they may not be able to make a sound quite like what you're thinking without, for example, register.
Mhm.
If we talk about register, middle school. I just did a middle school honor choir, and the kids, especially some of the young tenors whose voices have just changed, struggle with getting out of their chest register.
Mhm.
So I might have them go toward ooh or something that will help them get through their break with ease. And so to me, that maybe is different than a band-aid, but it's a way to navigate register shifts, developmental levels of voices, those kinds of things. I think the band-aid vowel situation, though, is very tricky because it can produce a sound that feels like the right sound because everybody's sound is you go to the least common denominator, right? The least
Mhm.
colorful voice.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and that's pretty pleasing because it sounds blended and nobody's getting hurt and it feels safe and it's fine. But but I think that's when we get into trouble with our voice faculty colleagues because then singers come out of rehearsal and they're exhausted because they're not efficiently using their vocal folds and they're
Yep.
not using the full spectrum of color of their voice. So I do think it's challenging, but yeah, you're right. When people are like, "Well, I'm a week away from the concert, and I've got 20 random things going on in my classroom, and we're just going to live on ooh for a while to get there." There's some good to that because it does help train choirs to listen and to unify.
Mhm.
But the problem with it is you're never really getting their full timbre, their full color capability. And so it's never really going to be super exciting to listen to because there's not a lot of range to it.
Right. And I would only clarify one thing in my little rant, which was that I think you doing warm-ups on E and oo, I wouldn't consider that band-aidy at all unless it wasn't actually E and it wasn't actually oo. So for example,
Ah, yes.
if you're doing E, uh, the umlaut version of E, because you don't want to go through the work of teaching your singers how to sing E with a released jaw mechanism, because of course
Yeah,
we speak E with our jaw completely closed. And so most singers will try to sing it that way. And so
sure.
you get that harsh kind of nasty sound from that that's not very pleasing. And rather than teach them how to do it correctly with resonance space behind the tongue, uh, then you just wrap the ooh around it because it eliminates that dissonance that's created by the overtones that we hear as harsh or ugly. So
Right.
that's what I mean by band-aid vowel. It's the avoidance of teaching the correct anatomy of the vowel,
Sure.
so that we can get the blend to happen right away, and then we move on, and I think over a couple generations of this going on, is we've got folks that just think that that is a pure E vowel,
Yeah.
um, rather than looking linguistically at what is going on. So this will be another nerd thing. Have you ever heard of the pink trombone?
No.
Okay, I'm about to send this link. Can you see the little chat window that comes up on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, click that link.
Okay. Oh, the chat went away.
Oh no.
Can you send me one more time?
Yeah, I'll send it again.
Okay. Pink trombone. Okay. Barehanded speech synthesis.
Okay, so you click on it, and then what you can do is it shows you the tongue position of all the vowels. and you can hear it, and
Oh, yeah.
play with it. And kids, I've had kids have breakthroughs in voice lessons just because they can wiggle it around and they can move it around and they can hear what it sounds like, and it also gives them a very solid sense of the anatomy of the vowel and
That's
what's actually
amazing.
causing it. I actually had a student who found this and showed it to me. She said
That's
that,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. She said that there was there's a "I'm bored" button on her Chromebook apparently at school, and she clicked on this "I'm bored" button, and it takes you to a bunch of random websites. And she found this, and she's like, "What? I got to show this to Mr. Muntz." And so, yeah, we play with it in choir all the time. So
Oh, that is just fantastic.
yeah, so of course the audience listening on a podcast won't be able to see what I just showed Dr. Quist, but I will put that in the show notes. So it's something you've also got to use. It's a free little doodle that you can play with online. So
That's fantastic.
it's cool. It's pretty cool. So my next question then is kind of goes back to Voce Vista a little bit, because that's what ultimately inspired me to want to talk to you about this. Is
Yeah.
The the uses for a software like that in a voice lesson are really obvious, because of course
Yeah.
it isolates the individual singer and all the things that they're doing, and that's great. Have you used it in front of your choir? Have you ever put it up on the screen in front of a choir?
I have. But of course, with the acoustic information coming from a choir as opposed to an individual singer, the information just can never be as precise. So you
Right.
can't draw nearly as many conclusions from that. But I
Mhm.
think you can use it as a visual and as a teaching tool to explain things.
Yep.
It can give some feedback, some visual feedback that is useful. But I think it's challenging, especially if you're singing in harmony. Now you can see the presence or lack of the singer's formant, and you can see when pitches and signals are clear or not.
Hmm.
But it's definitely a different kind of an experience than if you're with a solo voice, for sure.
Right. I've had that same experience, and although I do find it very useful to put in front of the choir, I just do very. I've kind of worked out some helpful exercises to do with it on the screen. So, for example, singing an 8-part motet into Voce Vista is not going to be helpful,
Right.
because there's just too much going on, and it's going to show it basically just a big blotch of
Yeah.
red, and it's not going to show anything. But so what we do is I'll have the basses, usually on an ah or an o, sing a fundamental. We'll pick random keys and try different things, and then I'll ask, and of course, then they sing it, sustain it, breathe, and I usually do this in a choir of about 85 or so, and so you got
Okay. Yep.
25 guys are kind of cycling through, trying to keep that fundamental going, and then I might be able to see their their overtones getting louder, and as they tune and all of that, and
Yes.
the rest of the choir can see it, and then I'll do something like I'll say to the tenors to sing into their first overtone,
Yes.
and then, because then you can see on the screen, it's all going by in real time. If they shoot for that octave and miss, then
You can see it.
they can
Yep.
see it right away, and then they adjust to it, and then not only do they adjust to it because they can see it, then they can hear what happens
Yes.
instantly when it lines up, and then I'll say, okay, altos, can you add maybe the next overtone? And so,
Yep.
and they've got that keyboard off to the side. So I find that it works well as long as you're not doing like active music, if that makes sense. Like if the music's not moving around too much, then it's really cool.
Yes. Yes. I've used it in exactly that way. So to discuss vowels,
Hmm.
whether they're really singing the vowel that we're asking them to sing, and to deal with tuning based on where the overtone structure is. That is exactly how I've used it. But
Hmm.
you're right. I don't have them sing, a bird motet into it and then expect anything super meaningful, except sometimes, especially if you're singing something homophonic or a
Hmm.
final cadence, then you can see the presence or lack of a clarity of the singer's formant, which basically just shows me, are we all kind of tapping in and resonating together in a way where that, because of that clustering, the information it looks like a line on the screen, but that's because the information has to get smaller and smaller, the higher you go.
Hmm.
And so you kind of see that collection of color up there, and okay, we're kind of tapping in. And then you can see it with a choir that isn't doing that. It just looks fuzzy. And so that's kind of the only way I find it useful if you're singing something with a bunch of different pitches, but it's super useful for intonation. And I think just simply identifying whether or not a vowel is what it is and if it's resonating.
Hmm. Yeah. So if you're in a, um, let's say in an honor choir working with younger singers, like high school singers, is this something that you kind of have in your bag of tricks always? And do you talk to them about it in that kind
Yeah,
of setting?
I do. Yeah.
Because the reason I ask that question is that I have gotten some kickback or polite kickback when I discuss these topics with my colleagues, that kids the age that we work with don't really understand these things, and therefore it might be counterproductive to talk about them. It could get them overthinking and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Now that hasn't been my experience. My kids nerd out on this stuff too, so I think it has to do with how it's presented.
Yeah.
But is that so? Do you feel like even in a, like, say, a weekend honor choir, that you can, there are concepts that you can toss out and they can grasp them and apply them?
Yeah, I'll start out and I'll have them do Ming Ming, volume knob, hum into a pitch,
Hmm.
hum into a vowel, and I'll talk to them about chiaroscuro, for example. I'll say, "What does that word mean?" And always somebody knows, and it's from art. We talk about it, and then we talk about sounds. What do voices sound like? And those that have heard voices and go, "Oh yeah, I can hear what there's like a bell-like quality or a ringing-like quality to it."
Hmm.
I just help them to be thoughtful about what is it that we're actually doing, what kind of sounds are we trying to make, and then I do talk to them about those things, but I kind of briefly and through play. I'll say, make this sound. Okay, what was that like? And on the spectrum of dark to light, what was that? And just sort of in that way. I don't go super crazy with it because there's just not enough time, but I
Right.
definitely address it so that they can start to be thoughtful about it.
Right. I figured you probably didn't like go all the way into, the frequency of the formants and, all that kind of stuff in an honor choir. But, do you reference like the concept of overtones even?
Yes,
Yeah. And I
always.
think that's great. I think that has to be part of a kid's music education, because it's how it works. Like it's how
Totally.
it's how everything that we experience when we listen to music works. I think one of my favorite things to do is to put up the software on the screen, and I'm very fortunate. My classroom has like a movie theater size screen, so
Awesome.
it's like they can see all this stuff. And so I'll play a note on the piano and then sing the note immediately after, so that they can see how the overtones all look different from the piano to the human voice, and then
Yep.
watch their brains explode when they realize that that's actually how we can tell that it's a human and not a piano. Like
Right.
that's and because they never think about, they would never think about that. They would just
Yeah.
take it for granted that it's like a natural phenomenon. Well, I mean, it is, but that it's a magical phenomenon that we can tell that it's a human.
Yes.
And this is why you can tell it's your mom talking and not your sister, or whatever.
Right. Right.
Everybody shapes and forms those overtones and formats a little bit differently. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic, and I agree with you though that you don't want to go too crazy with it all at once. I would say we probably, in my classroom, we talk about this kind of stuff in a concentrated way where I'll kind of stop the rehearsal and talk about some
Yeah.
concepts, maybe like once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
And then throughout the rehearsal process, I might reference, oh, hey, did you hear that we just did that thing we talked about, 2 weeks ago on the screen? Oh yeah, remember that? Oh yeah, okay. And then they'll make those connections. But I don't obviously sit down and have a podcast level discussion with them every day.
No, but some kids, when I did a presentation once and my students came to it, some of them said, "Oh, I understand better now why you're choosing to do the things that you're doing, and I understand better what sound you want me to make." And I
Hmm.
remember thinking, okay, maybe I should explain more of this because some people, that's just how they learn. I mean, everybody's got a learning mode, or any combination of those. And for some people, this is really helpful, and for others, it's not. So it
Right.
just depends.
Right.
Mix it up.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think maybe even kind of, I could probably do talk with you about this all night, but we've been going at it, so I'll give us one, more little angle to discuss, and then
Yeah.
we'll wrap this up. So one of the things that I've also noticed about this topic is that, um, this kind of goes back a little bit into the Band-Aid vowel idea in that, is there a objective definition that you could prove and measure of what a vowel sound is, what it consists of, what makes an an E, and what makes an O, and all of those things? I would argue that yes, there is, and we can prove it.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, is there also room for the conductor to develop preferences of what types of those vowel colors and how much resonance they want and which overtones they want to be present and not present as part of the artistic side of what we do? And I would argue that absolutely yes, there is, obviously. But my only problem is when we start to use that artistic side of how we listen and develop preferences, and use that to describe the way things actually are versus the way we want them to be. And that kind of goes into that idea of like, so is it a pure E vowel to wrap your lips around E?
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not objectively, but could you as the conductor decide that you like that one better?
Right.
Sure. Just don't call it a pure E.
Right. Well, and what's so tricky about that topic is it's almost impossible to remove language from this.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're talking about the British choirs, for example. The vowel open E, epsilon,
Mm-hmm.
I have learned, is almost impossible for American choirs to sing well and in tune. It's just a very difficult vowel to find.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much the case with British choirs, but if you listen to a British person, and now even within England, there are a million different kind of shades of accents, but there is a natural resonance to that vowel in their language that we don't have in most of America. And so they can just tap into that sound a little more easily because they grew up imitating. I mean, we learn language through imitation. And so, yeah, a pure E, certainly it is an objective thing, but there are so many probably tiny shades of exactly, I mean, it's sort of almost infinite with tongue position and throat position and all of it together. It's infinite, the colors you could get. So it's tricky. And yes, of course, people have preferences. It's like, yeah, I know that's not pure E, but that's what I want. Absolutely. I mean,
right. Yeah, and I think for me, the reason I even think that it's a contention, the reason that it even bothers me, is that I kind of feel protective of the education that kids get. And in that I don't want them to be taught, and of course I can't control what everyone teaches in everyone's classroom, but for my kids, I want them to know what the objective stuff is, so that can better inform the artistic choices that we make, so that we can in fact, we're doing one of Eric Barnum's pieces right now, his after music. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's gorgeous and I love it. And there's this part at the end of the piece where my entire 85 voice choir of kids that sing with a lot of resonance normally are singing unison, right in an easy part of their voice, and it's supposed to be pianissimo. And and they know how I feel about choral Band-Aid vowels because I talk about it all the time. And and I ask them to put ooh around everything because it was just I could not get it to be soft enough. Like it was nothing I could do to get it to be soft enough. So I was like, okay, let's kill some overtones. And they went, "Are you sure, Mr. Muntz? Are you sure we should?" I was like, because I've told them how we don't do that. And I said, well, in this case, we're going to do that because the piece needs it, and the dynamic contrast overall needs it. It's not our new normal, but we're going to do it for this piece. And I like that approach because at least my students know that we're making an artistic choice right now. We're not making a here's how you sing all the time choice right now. It's just and they have the vocabulary.
Yes, and then they can make better informed choices in their own voice as well.
And so
the problem with it is that it's so complicated without even talking about, like you were talking about, an oo vowel at the end of the piece getting softer. There's a whole thing. Have you ever heard of inertive reactance?
No.
Inertive reactance has something to do with how certain vowels affect your folds. So at certain pitch levels and certain dynamic levels, certain vowels will help your vocal folds to come together more easily because of the column of air that goes back and forth.
Huh.
And that may have something to do with why rolling to an oo vowel at the end of a soft passage is easier to do. It's not just that it's reducing overtones, but it's that you're allowing them a vocal posture
Mm.
that lets them keep phonating even though
Yeah.
they're not using a lot of energy. And that's a whole other topic, but it's still connected and related, so it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, and that makes sense. I've never heard those terms, but I've sung enough to know that, like, that's something
You
I
can feel it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's something I do. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really cool, and I think uh, it didn't even scratch the surface of the idea of just some of the stylistic and cultural things that
Yeah.
happen when we sing,
Yeah.
and I think that it's this is the same kind of a thing. Uh, Can you identify objectively what the singer is doing, and at the same time recognize that there are valid choices from different singing styles around the world and different kind of
Yes.
cultural expressions? But I feel like there is a pushback in the profession to not even want to define it objectively because we're afraid that we might make it seem less than. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like the idea that if I say, well, this type of singing isn't using a pure XYZ vowel as part of the style, say musical theater or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then most people hear that as, well, then you think musical theater is dumb
Right.
or not as good. I'm like, no, no, I put it up on the screen and I see the overtones and they're different. And I'm just trying to point out that they're different
Yep.
and with science in mind. But so many folks, I don't feel like can look at it that way. They have to look at it as just it's all the same, and right. And so I
And
think
it's
that's a
totally not.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
a frustration for me because I feel like it's holding us back um, as a profession to not be able to look at it like every other academic subject in the university has to, which is to gather evidence and you know
Yeah.
make a case, and then we wonder why other academic subjects don't take us seriously.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely right. And it's something too that our voice colleagues, I wish they don't always understand it. And I feel like if we all understood it better, I think there would be less fear of you're going to hurt my student or what, if we were all kind of operating with a similar goal and concept of that objective truth. That's you
Hmm.
can't really, but yeah, it's still very new to people, I think.
Yep, yep. We're
So
here. We are on the cutting edge of choral science.
yeah.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I'm glad to have a chance to chat about it.
Yeah, it sounds like we're on the same page on a lot of that stuff, and I can't rule out the idea that I might not reach out and contact you with more questions about this because I think this is
That would be great.
I
I
think it's an
love talking to
important
people about it.
yeah, and I think it's an important topic, and I honestly think one that's kind of under discussed
Yeah.
in our profession. So I'm very very appreciative that you came on and spent an hour with us talking about this tonight, and I think people are going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to do it. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, so I could go all day.
Yeah, yeah, maybe we'll have to do a sequel sometime.
That'd be fun.
All right, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. It really means a lot to me that you have chosen to spend your time listening to the Choralosophy podcast. I know I'm having a great time making it, so I'm hoping that you're enjoying listening. I'm doing a lot of work over here at this end to make these shows, and I hope you're getting something out of it. Now, if I'm speaking to you now and you are listening this far into an episode, I'm probably talking to one of the people that really does enjoy this show. So thank you so much for sticking around and for listening. And this episode in particular, like I said at the beginning, was very interesting for me and was really exciting for me to make. I've been trying to get hooked up with Amanda for a while to try to get the scheduling to work out to do this. Not to mention the connection with Voce Vista. I've been trying to make that work behind the scenes for quite a while since the show started, to be honest. So this one was a lot of work, and I think there might be some follow-ups on this topic coming up, especially if it generates any questions from you about the science, about the acoustics, about the way to teach this concept. I think that's going to be a topic of, in fact, that could be a podcast by itself. It's just me talking about things that we do in my classroom to make sure students understand this. I think a lot of people would be impressed if they were to quiz a lot of kids in my class about how overtones and vowel formation and the anatomy of vowels and how it works. And it's mostly because I've been able to use this visual tool, and the science and the concepts behind it that I learned from Amanda were the catalyst for me with that. So I think it's a really interesting thing. So thanks again for sticking around, and on your way out, don't forget to stop by over at graphitepublishing.com, ryanmain.com, sightreadingfactory.com, and of course vocevista.com/choralosophy, and check out the products of some really good people who are doing a lot of really good things for our field and our profession, helping make our jobs easier, all kinds of great things that are going on at those companies. And you can use Choralosophy at checkout at all of those in order to get a 10% discount if you see something you like, which is awesome. And then finally, a reminder, head over to patreon.com/choralosophy and join that growing community over there. We're getting close to 20 members over there who are pulling this content off the podcast, but then also going back for seconds, so to speak, over on Patreon and taking advantage of the extra materials, the extra episodes, the more in-depth conversation that's going on over there on show topics and behind the scenes. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you around Christmas time for a Christmas episode. Stay tuned.